great. Another fabulous
Freedom Range
week
Radio
here.
Network is not responsible for the views and opinions of the guests or hosts of the show.
Again.
The views and opinions expressed in this show are strictly the views and opinions of
I
guests
don't know.
or
I
hosts
didn't hear
of this
the
program.
song play on my end, so I'm not sure what's going on. Anyhow. I got a recording for you guys tonight. It takes up about an hour and a half. But anyway, I wanted to give you guys an update. Last week, even though we had all this technical difficulties, the archive did some information, and at least the music was able to play. So let's see what happens this week. Yeah, it'll come fine, and everything will be picked up. If not, then we can go from there and see what happens. Anyway, all right, update on the garden. Man, I've been outside enjoying it, working with the soils, setting up everything. Set it up. Got plants going. They're doing fantastic. Today, it's almost every day. Going to go out there and spend some time with my garden. It's quite enjoyable. A lot of people are out there doing their thing. And hopefully by now you've enough videos and heard enough rain. Even some food. Other reason than that. Plant. Oh, excuse me. So happens when you spend a day out in the sun, tires you out. Makes you feel good. There's been a lot of hype and a lot of talk. Everybody talking about the Hunger Games when that came out. That's still being talked about a lot, but sadly, like I thought, the movie, quite frankly, not for the reason you may think, though. If you get a chance, and all three, the trilogy of the Hunger Games series is actually available out there. Purchase, get audio, CD, book audio, or go and buy the books. The books are always 10 times better than the movie. And I finally finished the trilogy today. And I'm not going to give no spoilers on it. If you picked up on the message of what was taking place and what was going on, and you thought it was a pretty good movie, but you still may have missed a lot of the information and a lot of the point of what was happening. After I'd read the book, I had watched the movie. So I'm trying to follow on. Like, man, they're leaving so much out. Well, this isn't explained. That isn't explained. Nothing's, it's just so too many dots missing, if you will, to get from point A to point B. And if you want to connect those dots and you really want to find out the story of Katniss and what took place on that first Hunger Game for her and what took place when she returned home, then you really do need to get the trilogy. They could have made this a small mini-series. Could have been done in 6 hours compared to trying to condense it for a 2-hour movie. But that's Hollywood for you. Now some people think, well, that's just the propaganda of the government of where we're heading today. They're just, rubbing our noses in it. Well, need to read the trilogy. To discover a lot more than your assumptions. But anyway, that's the update. Garden's doing well. Got some more seeds I want to get into the ground probably tomorrow. I want to add some more to my current crops that are growing. The ground's all prepped and ready to go. Just got to add my seeds and get those in tomorrow. A little late to be doing from seed for a lot of things, but that's okay. Because if you plant things at different times, depending on what you're planting, not everything comes ripe at the same time, and this way you have food spaced out, the whole year, right on to the winter time. So that's kind of my goal there. I have my tomatoes are looking great. Peppers are really starting to come in now. Of course, my corn is growing like a weed, and so is my squash and my beans. They're doing excellent. But I want to get some more cucumbers in. They go well, I believe, with different melons. That patch there, cucumber melon. And we're together from something new for me. These were stuff, and cucumbers is a problem. Pickles. That's in order to make you got to add cucumbers. That's a little bit. Lots of those. Anyway, you guys are settled in. I'm going to play this for part. Probably be a part series. It was edited out and edited down real, just to get you the important information here. This is L.B. Bork, founder of the People's Awareness Coalition and the author of the Red Amendment. If you haven't gotten your copy yet, please do so. And this is from one of the older talk shows with Jeff, who's a state national here in Florida, in my country. And he brings it together and puts it all together in a nice package along with all his reference material and his notes. And you can get a copy of that. You'll hear how to do that throughout the program. But it's about an hour and a half. So we're going to get that thing going there. Actually, 20 minutes or so. So if you guys are ready, look at the chat. Okay, everybody's sound is breaking up again. Yeah, that's good. It's getting better. That's good. Anyway, that's why I'm just a little frustrated because the intro song didn't even want to play. I couldn't hear anything at all coming to my headset, so I don't know what happened there. So we're going to get going here anyway. Kick on back and give a listen to this broadcast. It's been edited down, like I said. We're going to have, this is part 1 and 2. They're edited together. They'll run consecutive. And then maybe next week we'll get 3 and 4 up for you. We'll see how the response are. And then the final part is only going to be about 20 minutes long or so. I have to double check once it's done, depending on when editing phase. So long it is when that one's done. And then we can take questions, answers, call-in numbers, all that kind of good stuff. But for now, once there's nothing else taking place, let's start this recording. And we'll be back at the end of the broadcast to finish out tonight's show. Enjoy.
Well, good evening, one and all. This is The Ultimate Remedy. My name is L.B. Bork. Hope everyone's doing well this 21st of January in the year of our Lord, 2009. In regards to personam jurisdiction with the courts, if you're in that body politic, they're going to have automatic jurisdiction over you in all personam issues, or that's the legal fiction or the presumption that they're going to apply to you. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. Jeff has been with me before on the show. He is one of the state nationals. I guess he's on. Hello, Jeff.
Hey.
Hey, I was just telling the folks that you've been on the show before, and you've been a state national for about 3 years now, I believe.
2005.
That's going on 4 years, yeah. I've been doing this for people for about 10 years now, and I was the first one that I believe. I have not seen any evidence to negate what I believe to be true. Is I'm the first one to go beyond the state citizenship issue and go to the nationality, which basically no one has done in 140 years or more. Actually, it's been there, but no one really looked at the issues that surround it. And for the past 200 and some years, of course, there's been a lot of disinformation, as far as I'm concerned, throughout the Federalist Papers and other writings to confuse people, is why no one understands that the state governments are actually national governments. They don't apply international law to how the union of these American states are put together. And I'm the first one, I think, in over 200 years to really go deep into this study. Of course, there's been a lot of historical documentation, as Joseph Rory has brought forth, that has been altered or covered up. So, we're talking 150 years about since the Civil War took place. So they've destroyed a lot of information. So it's a lot harder to find anything that would relate to the research I've done. I learned a lot from Bovier's Law Dictionary, 1856 version, is where I started having my eyes opened. And, of course, studying the things that surround the Civil War period, and to what they've put out in political propaganda to confuse people. So, anyway, having said that, I mentioned in the email to the folks that are on the PAC e-letter that we're going to talk about Section 2 of the 14th Amendment tonight. That's going to be the end result of where we're going for the next two shows. Tonight we're going to talk about status, and Jeff has been diligent to put some information together. Like I said, he's been a national for 3 years now or more, and he's done a lot of study, and he's probably the best second best knowledgeable person that I know on the issue or subject in the United States that I've run across.
I'm flattered.
Yeah, well, take it lightly. No, I'm just kidding. There's not a lot of people that are glomming onto this information. It's very surprising. Go ahead, Jeff. I've been talking long enough.
We are attempting to establish within tonight and in the subsequent show next week, possibly even to a third show, we are establishing why it's a crime pursuant to constitutional law and international law, why it's a crime to be what we call a United States citizen, what the law says a United States citizen is. We're going to prove to you in law, without any conjecture, that being a U.S. citizen is a crime, that you're in fact engaged in criminal activity against your lawful state body politic, which has been usurped through this unlawful citizenship imposed via the 14th Amendment. So tonight we're showing that the constitutionally repugnant Reconstruction Acts, these acts of the 39th Congress, were constitutionally repugnant, and these acts imposed the 14th Amendment. Did not ratify it, it imposed it unlawfully, pursuant to martial law powers that were also constitutionally unauthorized. There are constitutionally authorized martial law powers, however, but the Reconstruction Acts met none of that criteria. So I'm going to lay out a timeline. This might seem rather dry, might even seem like a history lesson, but hopefully you'll be blessed by this information and get a pen and pad out, or if you want, I will email you my notes And that's a good idea. That way we'll know if you're actually paying attention or not and actually listening to the show or actually interested in this material by emailing me for these notes. It's all it is a timeline. It's nothing fancy, but you can do your own research. You can email me, Jeff. Here's my email, floridarepublic@gmail.com. That's floridarepublic@gmail.com. Email me for the notes. Anyway, we're going to start in 1861, and the object of the Civil War, which was from 1861 to 1865, that the actual intention of it was not for the southern states to be conquered or subjugated. And this is evidenced in, I'm referring to a House journal. Now, you can go on the Library of Congress website, and you can research everything I'm saying. It's right there. That you can research the House journals, and I'm also be making references to the statutes at large, and there's certain years that those are available, and you can research the statutes at large at the Library of Congress website. Okay, so what I said in 1861, we have a statement by Vice President Andrew Johnson and a Congressman Crittenden that stated, for the record, in the House Journal and in the Senate Journal, is recorded that the intention of the Civil War was not to conquer or subjugate the southern states. You're going to see why this is why I'm starting to this point. It's very important. I'm going to quote this House Journal, July 22nd, 1861, page 123. Senate Journal, July 25th, 1861, page 92. Mr. Crittenden submitted the following resolution, that this war is not waged on their part, that's the northern states. This war is not waged on their part in any spirit of oppression, or for any purpose of conquest or subjugation, or purpose of overthrowing or interfering with the rights of established institutions of those states. He's referring to the southern states. Now here's what he's saying the intention is, but to defend and maintain the supremacy of the Constitution and to preserve the Union with all dignity, etc., etc. Anyway, he's saying to preserve the Union with all dignity, equality, and rights of the several states unimpaired, and that as soon as these objects are accomplished, the war ought to cease. So there's your intention right now. That's the Crittenden-Johnson resolution. Okay, moving on to 1865. We're going to fast forward. The war is over with. January 31st of 1865, the war was still going on, and the 13th Amendment was proposed to all of the states that existed at the time. May 10th of 1865, President Johnson proclaims the end of the hostilities on land. So, now January 31st, 13th volume, Statutes at Large, page 757, and when President Johnson proclaimed an end to the hostilities on land, and the only duty left was to arrest the vessels at sea of the southern states, and that was on May 10th, and that's in Senate Journal starting at page 7 of May 10th. So, I'm going somewhere with this. Now, the states which ratified the 13th Amendment, southern states, okay, I'm just going to say the southern states, Virginia, Louisiana, Tennessee, Arkansas, South Carolina, Alabama, North Carolina, that was in February of 1865. That's a month. I mean, whoa, that's like a week, almost a little over a week after the 13th Amendment was proposed to the states. They ratified it. These southern states did. Now, on December 4th of 1865, so this is almost at the end of the year now, that's a new Congress sitting. So the reps in Congress that ratified the 13th Amendment was in 1865. That's the 38th Congress. But now a new Congress comes in, the 39th Congress. The first session, December 4th, 1865, they suggested denial of the seats in the House and Senate of the southern states on the basis that they had no legal governments and were in rebellion. So this is where we're starting to get the plot here. Okay, if the 39th Congress is claiming that these states were illegal governments, then if they were illegal, how come the Congress sent the 13th Amendment to those southern states? And then when those southern states ratified the 13th Amendment, how come they recognized their ratification? See, if they were unlawful states, they would have not recognized the ratification of the 13th Amendment. That's the anti-slavery amendment, so-called. They would have recognized that as legitimate if their governments were legitimate. So think about that. So the 39th Congress is just making this baseless allegation saying that they're going to deny seats in Congress to the southern states, that they had no legal governments and were in rebellion. But see, that's December 4th, 1865, but May 10th of 1865, President Johnson proclaims the end of the war. Are you starting to see the logic, people? There's something weird. So, and then not but 2 days after this 39th Congress says that they're illegal and in rebellion still, Georgia ratifies the 13th Amendment. And then December 18th, later on that month, 13th Amendment was declared ratified. December 28th, Florida ratifies the 13th Amendment. So if these southern states are ratifying an anti-slavery amendment, how are they illegal? How do they have these illegal, unlawful governments? Or how are they in rebellion? So we're going to fast forward to 1866. We're in March 3rd. Okay, the 39th Congress has a resolution denying the seats in the House and the Senate. See, in December 4th, 1865, they just stated it, but now they have a resolution in both houses, joint resolution, that the southern states should be denied seats in the House that they're in rebellion. And that's 1866, March 3rd, 1866. You can look that up in the journals or email me for the notes, and I'll give you that email later on, guys, so hang tight. Okay, so that's March 3rd, 1866. The 39th Congress resolves that they have no legal governments, they can't have seats in the House, they're totally denied seats. So the 39th Congress is not seated lawfully. It's incomplete. It's incomplete. There's 11 southern states that are being denied representation with no evidence. And they already ratified the anti-slavery amendment. And the war was declared over in May 10th of 1865.
Something smells in the state of the United States.
Huh?
Something stinks in the state of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if I'm being repetitive, people, and redundant, but some people have a hard time grasping this, so that's why I'm hammering this, okay? So we got April 2nd, 1866. This is a month after 39th Congress passes that stupid resolution. President Johnson proclaims that the insurrection is at an end in all of the southern states. That's April 2nd, 1866. You can look that up in the 14th volume of the Statutes at Large, pages 811 through 813. President Johnson proclaims the insurrection at an end in all the southern states, except it was further proclaimed that each state's civil authority was to be restored, and that they had shown sufficient evidence of loyalty to the Union by conforming to Johnson's policies of incorporating the 13th Amendment into legislation. So you have the President of the United States of America proclaiming that the insurrection's at an end in April 2nd of 1866, and that the civil authority was to be restored because they incorporated the 13th Amendment into their laws. Should be no beef. They should have seats in the House. 11 states unrepresented now. Okay, June 16th, 1866. 14th Amendment. It's also called Article 14 in Roman numerals. June 16th, 1866. 39th Congress, the incomplete 39th Congress. The 39th Congress with 11 seats missing proposes the 14th Amendment, but to all the states. So, wait a second. They're saying that these 11 southern states are unlawful and in rebellion, and they have no legal governments, but they're proposing a 14th Amendment to them to be ratified? How does that square? Okay, and then August 20th, so that was June 16th, 1866. August 20th, President Johnson further proclaims peace. Again, he does it a second. Okay, he's done this 3 times. May 10th, 1865, he proclaims an end to the hostilities. April 2nd, 1866, he proclaims that the insurrection is at an end to restore civil authority. August 20th now, 1866, he proclaims peace, and he gave notice of the resumption of civil government in the states which had seceded. So that's August 20th, 1866. If you want to look that up, that's the 14th volume of the Statutes at Large, page 814. So the President of the United States of America is saying it's all good with the southern states, that they have full resumption of civil government. Okay, now we have October 1866 through 1867. Okay, not only the southern states, but as we say down south, a whole mess of non-southern states rejected the 14th Amendment. We have Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, almost all 11. I think Tennessee was the only ones that wanted to ratify it. And many other non-southern states. You can look that up in my notes. We have supposedly unlawful, rebellious governments in the 11 southern states that are in rebellion, but at the same time they passed the Anti-Slavery Amendment, and their ratification is recognized as lawful and valid, but they're still being called unlawful at the same time. And then they're still, in the midst of their unlawfulness, they're being sent this 14th Amendment to ratify. They reject it, and then Congress does not recognize it or recognizes their negative ratification. In other words, it didn't get into the Constitution. Congress has to get, I believe, a two-thirds vote in Article 5 of the Constitution. There has to be a two-thirds vote in the House, or two-thirds of the states, or three-fourths of the states. I forget what it is. It's somewhere in Article 5. But the amount of states necessary...
Hold the thought, Jeff.
Yeah.
You got a break coming up here.
Yep.
Now we're talking to Jeff Caputo of the Florida Republic. This is The Ultimate Remedy. We've got a couple of announcements. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stay tuned. Yes, it's all going to fall on you because fraud cannot persist over truth. Anyway, we're talking to Jeff tonight from Florida. He's been a state national for 3 years now.
3 years.
3 years or so. I've been going on 10, 12, somewhere in there. I forget. As soon as I found out they stole my nationality from me, I took it back immediately. But anyway, I just want to add a couple notes in here, just talking about the states, or the United States and the Congress, calling the people of the South rebels and things of that nature, and insurgents and insurrection. It's totally bogus. They weren't, because the federal government doesn't have the authority to tell the states what to do. There's a thing called perpetual union, which is a bunch of nonsense also. It's one of my favorite definitions I like to use to explain how people commit resistance against their government. It's out of Noah Webster's definition from 1828, and it's listed under insurgent. If you get a Webster's 1828 dictionary, you'll see it in there. And it's not a law dictionary, it's just a general purpose dictionary. But Webster said, an insurgent is a person who rises in opposition to civil or political authority, one who openly and actively resists the execution of laws. An insurgent differs from a rebel. The insurgent opposes an execution of a particular law or laws. A rebel attempts to overthrow or change government, or revolts and attempts to place his country under another authority. All rebels are insurgents, but all insurgents are not rebels. Okay, so in order for the states of the South to be rebels, that would mean the United States would have had to create the states. And that's quite the opposite. It wasn't, the states created the United States. So there's no way that the states can rebel against the United States. They just took back as a sovereign nation what was theirs. And if you go back into case law and into Amjur, here's a definition from Amjur. Rebels, it's under rebels. A term loosely but incorrectly applied to the Confederate forces engaged in the Civil War. And you'll find that in American jurisprudence under insurrections, Section 2. They might have changed it now, but that's a definition from the 70s.
That's a big gold nugget.
Yeah, it is.
They're starting to change amjurs, too. They're taking stuff like that out.
Yeah, we're finding that they alter amjur, too. So these guys are the law doesn't change. It's consistent. They just dumb people down, okay? Joseph Rory has done extensive research on this, of how they change dictionaries and to brainwash people. This whole collective system is based on deception, lies, and fear. And that's why I keep telling people, on the other side of the coin, there's the disinformation. I mentioned that, people are saying George Bush might pull a coup or something like that and stay in office. Well, there is the other side of the coin that it might have been stopped by information coming out to that effect. That would cease it or cause it not to come about. That's the other possibility. Of course, we don't know all these things. So I guess the main point to keep in mind is just remember you have to do what you have to do, or we have to do what we have to do. And don't worry about what they're doing or what might happen. They mostly, they're operating off fear and deception. So, I'm still here. I wrote the Red Amendment 10 years ago. And I myself was scared when I released it, but I'm still here. So these guys do follow the law. The reason they keep everyone at bay is they put out disinformation and keep everyone ignorant. So anyway, that's what we're talking about tonight, trying to pierce some of the ignorance and get some information out to people.
Yes.
Anyway, go ahead, Jeff. Why don't you give your
email guys, again? I'm rattling off a bunch of info, and I will email you my notes, and I'll leave my email at the end of the break. The reason I'm not giving it to you now because I want you to listen. Anyway, we left off with the southern states. In a lot of non-southern states rejected the 14th Amendment, and the point is that if the 39th Congress was saying that the southern states were unlawful and in rebellion, how come they sent them an amendment to ratify? If 3/4 of the states do not ratify an amendment, then it does not become part of the Constitution. So the 14th Amendment was rejected and did not become part of the Constitution. So if these southern states were so rebellious and unlawful and illegitimate, then why was there negative ratification? In other words, why was that recognized by virtue of the 14th Amendment not being in the Constitution? Think about that. So that was October 1866 through the beginning of 1867 that this 14th Amendment was rejected. Okay, here we are in 1867 now. We're in February 8th, 1867. A month before what were the Reconstruction Acts, a month before those were colorably implemented, the 39th Congress introduces a bill, Bill 1143, called A Bill to Establish an Additional Article of War for the More Complete Suppression of the Insurrection against the United States. So, for those of you that were listening first break, wait, President Johnson just said that there was peace across the land 3 times on the record, saying that there was no rebellion, that they were following everything. They passed the Anti-Slavery Amendment. They incorporated in their legislation. The President of the United States of America says that there's peace in the land, but then you have these people in the 39th Congress saying an additional article of war in times of peace to suppress this insurrection? Okay, now we're in March 2nd. First Reconstruction Act is colorably enacted, and that was March 2nd, 1867. You can look that up in Volume 14 of the Statutes at Large, page 428. But then President Johnson vetoes the act. Why do you think he vetoes the act? Here's a quote from his veto. Actually, this is from a third veto. Yeah, they tried passing this like 3 times, but I'm going to read, this is a juicy quote. If this assumption that these states have no legal state governments be true, he's saying if that's true, then the abolition of slavery by these illegal governments binds no one. For Congress now denies to these states the power to abolish slavery by denying to them the power to elect this legal state legislature or to frame a constitution for any purpose for the abolition of slavery. So hopefully you guys understand Johnson's logic, showing them how illogical that is. So here we are. We have the Second Reconstruction Act, March 23rd of the Second Reconstruction Act. President Johnson vetoes the act again. So the Third Reconstruction Act, July 19th, he vetoes it again. So these Reconstruction Acts were definitely an article of war. They installed military governments within these states to subjugate them. They called it an article of war. If you read the notes, you'll see how the Reconstruction Acts are an act of war, how they dethroned, or if you will, they broke up every state legislature, installed military governments within them. So what we're getting at is that this, and then Congress is passing this 3 times, and Johnson keeps vetoing it. And I believe there was 5 of these. The Fourth Reconstruction Act. So finally, basically, the result of the Reconstruction Act is that they forced these guys at gunpoint to adopt the 14th Amendment. So they forced them with military governments. So the result is that these states were colorably expelled from the Union, even though they were always in the Union. They were colorably expelled from the Union, and then they were admitted back in because they, as a whole other citizenship. And now, if we get into the whole premise of this, we're going to find out that this U.S. citizenship, the term citizen of the United States meant that you were a citizen of one of the states prior to the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment attempted to make a whole new status called United States citizen, meaning you were a federal citizen. And what we have here is James G. Blaine says, in making this extension of citizenship, we are not confining the breadth and scope of our efforts to the Negro. In other words, this wasn't just for black people. So these people that say the 14th Amendment was for black people is false, because here's a guy that was on the Reconstruction Committee telling you, no, this isn't to be confined to the Negro. It is for the white man as well. I'm just quoting him. This is James G. Blaine. We intend to make citizenship national. Heretofore, a man has been a citizen of the United States because he was a citizen of some one of the states. Now, we propose to reverse that and make him a citizen of any state where he chooses to reside by defining in advance his national citizenship. So what they did is they, instead of multiple state citizenship statuses, they consolidated it into one, making one a federal citizen. And breaking up the state legislature governments and then forcing them to adopt this amendment, they now have effectively made them new states within a state. In other words, if you guys understand how, like LB was saying, it's the states of the Union that make the United States, not the other way around. It's like this. If a state, before a state became a state, it was a territory. So before Florida became the state of Florida, it was the territory of Florida. And they had a constitution, but they weren't a state. And the way you become a state pursuant to the Constitution is that the people have to agree in your territory that they want to become a state of the Union. And then when they show, the reps show the evidence of that with their state constitution, with the people's consent, they go to Congress, and then Congress enacts a law saying, let it be enacted. This is the state of Florida now. So that's how a state is formed. Now, that was when, I'm just using Florida as an example because I'm from here. So Florida became the state of Florida in 1845, and they were recognized as Florida state citizens, as I just read here, and I have other cases that say that the word citizen of the United States means you're a citizen of one of the states, so you were a Florida state citizen before the 14th Amendment. And we're going to talk in later shows why state citizenship is not correct, why it's state nationality now, but that's beyond the scope of today. So when you study the Reconstruction Acts in the history, you'll see that these states were forced at gunpoint to adopt the 14th Amendment because, see, they didn't ratify it. So Congress had to come after them with military power to get them to adopt this 14th Amendment, which created this new national citizenship, which I just demonstrated here. That James G. Blaine said, no, the guy that's on the Committee of Reconstruction of the 39th Congress is stating right here in one of his commentaries. It's called Political Discussions, Legislative, Diplomatic, and Popular, 1856 to 1886. And
yeah, that was research that John Ainsworth found.
Yes, we thank you for that, Mr. John. And his wife found the book out of the blue at some bookstore.
Right, that's
Isn't that
true.
a trip? So I'm going to read that quote again. And in making this extension of citizenship, we are not confining the breadth and scope of our efforts to the Negro. It is for the white man as well. We intend to make citizenship national. Heretofore, a man has been a citizen of the United States because he was a citizen of some one of the states. Now we propose to reverse that and make him a citizen of any state where he chooses to reside by defining in advance his national citizenship. So there was no such thing as a national federal citizenship prior to the 14th Amendment. That's why they had to pass this 14th Amendment, and when the states rejected it, they had to force them at gunpoint and send military installations in times of peace. So that's the whole key, folks, that the states were always legal and legitimate. They passed the 13th Amendment. They had to have been recognized as legitimate. And it was in times of peace. So the only people that were in rebellion committing a crime was these evil people of the 39th Congress that drafted the Reconstruction Acts, which was the military authorization to force the legislatures at gunpoint to adopt the 14th Amendment into to colorably accept it.
They actually removed some of the governments, I believe all of them.
They removed them, yes.
Yes, and put in puppet governments.
And they put in puppet governments. And here, and see, what we're trying to say, folks, is that earlier I told you how a state is created, or not created, but how a state is accepted in the Union. It's by the people's consent, and it's by them giving them a constitution. But the thing is, the states were never expelled from the Union in the first place. They were always there. But on paper, you have the 39th Congress saying that they're not. And now here you have on paper, after the states were effectively destroyed, the southern states, here's the 39th Congress, whereas the people of North Carolina, South Carolina, Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida have, in pursuance of the provisions of an act, which is this Reconstruction Act, it's very long.
Yeah, they've gotten away with this based on people's ignorance. I don't even think Congress truly knows law today,
they don't.
Or even back then.
This is what they're saying. They're saying, whereas the people of, insert all these southern states, have framed constitutions of state government. So what they're saying here, folks, is that they're saying these states have framed constitutions as if they were never a state before, as if they're accepting them in again. Do you see the weird switcheroo they're doing, folks? Okay, a state is created by Congress saying, yeah, you guys framed a constitution. Yeah, all your people consented. You're a state of the Union now. Whereas once you were a territory. But then we have on paper them saying, nope, you're illegal, you're illegitimate, even though there's tons of evidence that you're not. Even though the president is vetoing that, we're just going to say that you're illegal anyway and that we're denying you seats, that you don't exist. We're going to put on paper that you don't exist, even though you really do. But now, you framed a constitution pursuant to our Reconstruction Acts, which, if you read the language of the Reconstruction Acts, it was mandatory that you incorporated the 14th Amendment in there. and they killed a bunch of people and got rid of their governments and said, oh, well, now you frame constitutions of state government, which are Republican, and have adopted said constitutions by large majorities of the votes. So they're saying that, therefore, being enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that each of the states of North Carolina, South Carolina, Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, Florida shall be entitled and admitted to representation in Congress as a state of the Union when the legislature of such state shall have duly ratified the amendment to the Constitution of the United States proposed by the 39th Congress and known as Article 14 upon the following fundamental conditions. So they're saying that they will become a state once they do that, but they were already a state in the first place. See, if they adopt the 14th Amendment, they're adopting that federal national citizenship that didn't exist before, folks, that singular communistic citizenship status that's been, rather than the multiple state body politic statuses. In other words, Florida state citizenship, Georgia state citizens. Now, let's fast forward to today. That's a big fast forward. That was in 1868. Those states became another state, a whole other state. So a state, if you look in the Law of Nations, is a body politic, of people. So the state that existed prior to the 14th Amendment was a state of Florida state or Iowa state citizens, because their legislatures were all Iowa state citizens or Illinois state citizens. And those states were able to confer their own individual state citizenship upon you. I have something by Andrew Johnson talking about that in one of his, I think he was vetoing the Civil Rights Act, which was actually a precursor of the 14th Amendment, that attempted to create this singular federal citizenship that didn't exist before. And Johnson said, no, the rights of the states to confer their own state citizenship exists just with them. And that the right to confer federal citizenship exists with the federal government. So he was definitely aware of the distinction between the two. And that was in 1866. So once you remove the people that were once Florida state citizens in the legislature, and then you make them new federal citizens at gunpoint and get them to become a whole new state of the union, you've now just created a whole other state of federal citizens that are just existing in Florida or existing in Georgia or existing in Tennessee or Illinois. So now by accepting this federal citizenship, you're actually committing a crime against your original body politic. You're getting into a foreign enemy that invaded your state. And
these people were mad at what Johnson stated, and they rewrote the Reconstruction Act to rectify the defects. And actually, it was written very cleverly. And this is something I discovered back in the mid-'90s, which led me to the information in the Red Amendment, and that's what Jeff's trying to describe right now, or is describing rather, that they made it a crime to vote because the states are proper countries, and they said, this is my spin on it, the conspirators that established all this information went back and said, okay, if we're going to have resistance to this, we know people are dumb, and Congress, they don't know their head from a hole in the ground. We're just going to sneak one in on them, and we're going to have people rebel against their lawful governments. So it's actually written right into the 14th Amendment, Section 2. And that's all I'll say. You can pick up from there, Jeff.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to tell you folks is that a foreign power that was not authorized by the Constitution, an act which was constitutionally repugnant, effectively created this particular citizenship status that did not exist, a federal citizenship status, and now they're saying, oh, well, the only way you can vote now is if you're one of us now. But that was all done at gunpoint. It was all done by martial law powers unauthorized by the Constitution in times of peace. In times of peace. And that is the heart of it. That's what we're getting at, is that they wrote the Section 2 of the 14th Amendment to seal that up and say, in so many words, that the right to vote is denied unless you're participating in rebellion.
And I've written papers on that extensively. Treason by Design, look it up on the internet.
It's written on a 30th grade level.
Yeah,
it's very hard to read and understand. But once you understand the history of where we're coming from with these Reconstruction Acts, you can see that does line
email.
Up.
We're time's up. Email.
All right. Oh, my email, floridarepublic@gmail.com. Get the notes, floridarepublic@gmail.com.
See you next week, folks, with part 2 of this. Bye.
See you.
Good evening, all you zombies. This is LB Bork. This is the Ultimate Remedy. How are you doing this week? I hope you're doing well. Today is January 28th in the year of our Lord 2009. We're going to pick up on the Red Amendment, the 14th Amendment issues from last week. We were talking to Jeff from the Florida Republic. Jeff has outlined what was done last week. We've had a lot of good compliments on it. I'd like to thank Jeff for taking the time to do this. I've had a lot of good comments on the show from last week, and Jeff was responsible for putting it together. So kudos to you, Jeff.
Hey.
So how are things in the Republic of Florida tonight?
We're all right. Pretty psyched here. Just in a nutshell, for those that missed the show last week, in a nutshell, I discussed how the Reconstruction Acts imposed the 14th Amendment, which did not get ratified. It was imposed by military law powers, and the result being that a new state was created within a state. For those of you who emailed me last week to get on the email list, I thank you much for showing interest, and I have now a list for just the listeners of the show. Anybody that's on that list need not send me a reminder email for the notes. You're on the list. You will get the notes for tonight's show. For those of you who do not have my email, I will give it out at the end of the show, so make sure you listen to tonight's show. Without any further delay, I'd like to get into, we left off basically the effect of a new state being created within a state. And there was somebody that emailed last week. They were saying that there's case law that says that a state is not a nation. In other words, a union state is not considered to be a nation. And the law really says otherwise. So what a judge says, and LB goes mostly into this, he says the first rule is to not read case law. And that kind of sounds like an irresponsible statement. But when you have insurgents, an insurgent body politic that has a vested interest in protecting themselves, they're going to come up with case law precedent that stacks the deck in their favor. So really it's your responsibility to understand what the law actually says and to be able to challenge a judge and say, no, the law doesn't say that. You're just making this up as you're going along. So the definition of state, according to the Law of Nations, for those of you that don't know what the Law of Nations is, it was written by Vattel. Now, yes, there are some hidden things behind Vattel that he writes in there that we believe are socialistic. But for the most part, we're holding their feet to the fire and say, no, you guys are supposed to be following this law. This is your law. And there are natural principles in there regarding... Now, these days, the term international law is used rather than the Law of Nations, but it's the same thing. The word state was definitely used in the U.S. Constitution, so what we're looking for is constitutional intent as to what the word state actually means. law of nations, now, if you look at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10 of the Constitution for the United States of America, it says that a duty of Congress is to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. So they definitely recognize the law of nations as law. Here's a case, U.S. versus Rivera, 2 U.S. 297. This is a 1793 case. Quote, the law of nations is a part of the law of the United States. So there's another, in Blackstone's commentaries, he says that the entire law of nations was incorporated into the English common law. And then the English common law was in turn adopted here. American law says if there is no statute which abrogates the common law, then the common law takes precedent and is in full effect. So unless there's a statute that tells your cops or your judges or your congressmen, unless there's a statute that says jump to them and so they can say how high, if that doesn't exist, then the common law is in force and effect. So therefore, if there's no statutory definition which says what a state is or isn't, then the common law takes over. In other words, the law of nations is the supreme definition that it cannot be broken down any further, according to what I've just set forth regarding these cases. One of the several states in the Union is also considered to be a nation. That's the issue. Is it or isn't? Okay, the law of nations preliminaries, this is idea and general principles of the law of nations in Section 1. Quote from the law of nations. Section 1. What is meant by a nation or state says, okay, nations or states are bodies politic, societies of men united together for the purpose of promoting their mutual safety, and advantage by the joint efforts of their combined strength. So it's saying that nations or states, it's using the words either or, it's the same thing. Nation or state are bodies politic. So the drafters of the 1789 Constitution for the United States of America, they incorporated the law of nations. The definition of the word state in this Constitution can incorporate the same definition as found in the law of nations, unless it's otherwise specifically provided. So since the point is, since the law of nations equates states with being nations, then any one of the de jure states. Now, we need to talk about what a de jure state is and a de facto state. We had talked about how there was no such thing as federal citizenship, or that there was a quasi-federal citizenship that was set forth in the Civil Rights Act of 1866 prior to the 14th Amendment, but it was a real loose idea. And there are cases, I believe in ex parte, I believe it's ex parte nulls. I have to find that.
Yes, that's correct.
I have it right here. Here it goes. This is an 1855 case, so this is prior to the 14th Amendment. So what we're saying is that I'm going to get to what a state, so I hope you guys understand that a nation is a state, so therefore a union state is a nation. Unless that particular body politic has 14th Amendment U.S. citizenship, which we're going to get into. So we are looking at ex parte null, and the issue is, was it presumed that the word citizen in the United States, did it mean that you were a federal citizen prior to the 14th Amendment, or did it mean something else? That's the issue. Citizen of the United States meant a citizen of only one of the several Union states. That the term United States was used more in a plural sense and not a singular sense. In other words, the word United States meant, or citizen of the United States meant you were a citizen of a certain state, not of this generalized, weird, communized melting pot centralized in Washington, D.C., called the United States. Ex parte nulls, 5 Cal 300, 1855 case, quote, a citizen of any one of the states of the Union is held to be and called a citizen of the United States, although technically and abstractly there is no such thing. To conceive a citizen of the United States who is not a citizen of one of the states is totally foreign to the idea and is inconsistent with the proper construction and common understanding of the expression as used in the Constitution, which must be deduced from its various other provisions. The object, then, to be obtained by the exercise of the power of naturalization was to make citizens of the respective states. So, this is another case. This is actually 1855 case, Sharon versus Hill. Federal case, 26 Federal 337 at 343. Quote, prior to the adoption of this amendment, they're talking about the 14th Amendment, strictly speaking, there were no citizens of the United States, but only some one of them. Congress had the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization, but not the power to make a naturalized alien a citizen of any state. But the states generally provided that such persons might, on sufficient residence therein, become citizens thereof, and then the courts held ab convenienti, rather than otherwise, that they became ipso facto citizens of the United States. So, well, there's evidence that this federal citizenship status was not presumed upon everybody prior to the 14th Amendment. That's the point we're making. Yeah, there may have been a federal citizenship that existed, but it wasn't presumed to be conferred upon people. So, what we had discussed last week, okay, when a state is created, the people agree to a constitution, and then they go to Congress, and Congress says, okay, now you're a state, as in the notes from last week. And that's how a state is created. When the southern states had military law powers forced on them, they were forced to adopt the 14th Amendment or implement it, and the military displaced and overthrew the state governments of the southern states and created new voting booths, everything, and then on paper, Congress kicked them out and then admitted them back in again, but with the 14th Amendment in the Constitution. In other words, a new body politic was formed of federal citizens that had a unified, communized federal citizenship status. Now, this was not in the notes. I'm going to read it again. This is written by James G. Blaine, who was on the Committee on Reconstruction. So this guy was a heavy hitter. He didn't help write. I actually thought he helped write the 14th Amendment, and I was wrong. He was on the Committee of Reconstruction, though, which was the dagger that caused the 14th Amendment. So there's this 39th Congress, and he's talking about the 14th Amendment and this citizenship that's about to happen. This is in 1866. So you hear a lot of people say that, oh, the 14th Amendment just gave black people citizenship, and so it doesn't apply to white people. Okay, people derive that from a case, because people make case law their god instead of reading the law, and they say, nope, this case says it was just for black people, not for white people, and then they go on their merry way and don't want to talk to you. However,
that's right.
Right?
That one always cracks me up.
James G. Blaine, though, this is a congressman for both, not only the 39th Congress, but the 40th Congress, who was on the Committee of Reconstruction, who set forth this military war power to impose the 14th Amendment. So Blaine would have more personal knowledge regarding the intent of the 14th Amendment, more so than some de facto Masonic judge. And let's be clear about that. So are you going to believe a Masonic judge in a satanic black robe that's protecting his own? Or are you going to trust the words of this congressman who is on the Committee of Reconstruction for the 39th and 40th Congress? Here, this is in his writings, or in his speeches. Transcription of his speech, 1866. And in, quote, and in making this extension of citizenship, we are not confining the breadth and scope of our efforts to the Negro. It is for the white man as well. Okay? We intend to make citizenship national. So in other words, there was no such thing as a national citizenship, folks. Continues here. Heretofore, a man has been a citizen of the United States because he was a citizen of some one of the states. That's what we were talking about in ex parte nulls, folks. Now, we propose to reverse that and make him a citizen of any state where he chooses to reside by defining in advance his national citizenship. So this is it, folks. The dual nationality was created through the 14th Amendment. This singular status. They homogenized state citizenship into a federal citizenship and have made it one thing, but it's still dual at the same time. It's not segregable. So we just define that a state is a body politic. So if the southern states who had their individual state citizenships and did not have this non-existent federal citizenship prior to the 14th Amendment, if those states got broken up by military war powers and usurped, that body politic got extinguished, guys. It got put on hold. It got put in suspended animation. When they imposed the 14th Amendment and it said, oh, we're going to accept you guys back in, now the 14th Amendment became part of the Constitution by the unauthorized Reconstruction Acts, by these unauthorized martial law powers. So a new state that's a body politic, think when I use the word state, I'm talking about body politic, a new body politic of federal citizens got put in place on those 11 southern states' legislatures. But now the result is people might say, well, I live in Michigan. That's not a southern state. Well, guess what? Because that 14th Amendment got implemented into the United States Constitution, then it carried over into Michigan. So because of the martial law powers enacted on the southern states, it affected every state thereafter by presuming this 14th Amendment United States citizenship. And I think whenever we take the premise of state nationality, and this is why we say you cannot be a state citizen. There's a lot of folks out there, even people we respect we do respect as diligent researchers, and they're sincere, but with all due respect, they're sincerely wrong on the issue that somebody can be a state citizen now. And this is why. This is evidence with Andrew Johnson. He was vetoing the Civil Rights Act. And in his veto, he's talking about how the Civil Rights Act is creating this federal citizenship. Here's his veto. By the first section of the bill, quote, all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power, excluding Indians not taxed, are declared to be citizens of the United States. Okay, now Johnson goes on to say about that, it does not purport to declare or confer any other right of citizenship than federal citizenship. It does not purport to give these classes of person any status as citizens of states, except that which may result from their status as citizens of the United States. Here, this is the clincher here, though. The power to confer the right of state citizenship is just as exclusively with the several states as the power to confer the right of federal citizenship is with Congress. So what he's saying is that back then, if you were in Michigan, the Michigan legislature was composed of Michigan state citizens prior to the 14th Amendment, and then you could say, I want to be a Michigan state citizen, and they'd be like, great, here's the process, here's the paperwork, now you're a Michigan state citizen. Well, can they do that now, guys? Can you go, if you're in Michigan right now, can you become a Michigan state citizen from your legislature? No, you can't, because, know why? There's no body politic, guys. There's no body politic of Michigan state citizens to confer that citizenship on you, so you cannot be a state citizen. You can only claim your state nationality, because nationality is natural. I think, Albie, you told me this a while ago about there's cases where, say somebody in France does a heinous crime, and they'll revoke the guy's French citizenship. So he can no longer be a French citizen, but he'll always be a French national because he was born in France. So he's a French national. Do you get it? Nationality is a naturally occurring, self-evident state of being. That or status. You're a French national because you were born in France. You're a French citizen because of political reasons.
There's only one thing that I disagree with what you said. You said Vattel laid out socialism in the Law of Nations. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really socialism. The conspiracy that I saw in Vattel's Law of Nations was he was calling people that belonged to a country or the body politic or a nation citizens. Now, to me, this was setting up the legal fiction or the presumption that the state was a municipality. And all this is carryover from the Roman Empire and the civil system of law that the Romans developed. So instead of calling people nationals of the country or nation they belong to, he was calling them citizens. So this set up the same principles that were used in the Constitution of the United States, or for the United States, from the get-go, and they were used in America from the get-go. So people were subject to this corporate municipality through the operations of Vattel. Now, if you look at the Declaration of Human Rights of the UN, or the United Nations, signed in 1948, that is a socialist agreement. However, they preserve rights of nations under the law of nations and the people of that nation. But that definitely is a socialist document. If you have time, I recommend that you pull it up and read it. We get a lot of information from that. Anyway, we've got about 20 minutes, or 20 seconds left, rather, till break. Got any closing statements until we go to break?
Yeah, the idea is that your state prior to the 14th Amendment had a state constitution. When the 14th Amendment came into place, that state constitution got scrapped, and now there's any constitution that got enacted after the 14th Amendment is now under that body politic of federal citizens rather than state citizens or state nationals. And so therefore that constitution is de facto and your old state constitution is de jure. We're going to get into those definitions.
We'll be back in a couple of minutes, folks. Well, we're back. This is The Ultimate Remedy. My name's L.B. Bork. We're talking again with Jeff Caputo from the Florida Republic tonight.
Well,
where were you?
We're talking about a de jure state which existed prior to the 14th Amendment. In other words, a state that had state citizens who had their own state constitution and their own state body politic, who were not connected to the federal government via Washington, D.C. with a federally imposed national unified status, which got imposed through the 14th Amendment via unauthorized martial law powers, which were the Reconstruction Act. There were 5 of them. So, and that the result of that, the state that got imposed through the 14th Amendment of federal citizens is a de facto state. Okay, de jure, this is in Black's Law Dictionary, rightfully, lawfully, by legal title. So a de jure state, as we said earlier, was formed by people forming a constitution, agreeing on it, and then agreeing to be a state and have Congress accept them as a state in the Union. And that's how it was done. Here's a quote from when Florida became a state. In fact, Iowa and Florida became a state the same day. And this is a quote. Whereas the people of the territory of Florida, so before it was the state of Florida, it was the territory of Florida, quote, whereas the people of the territory of Florida did, in like manner, by their delegates, on the 11th day of January, 1839, form for themselves a constitution and state government. So they then declare them to be states of the United States, Iowa and Florida. It's that simple. And the Reconstruction Acts were constitutionally repugnant war powers which abolished the southern states' original governments through violence against their consent, and they formed a new state or nation or body politic. It's the same word, guys. This body politic was now composed of 14th Amendment U.S. citizens, and in 15 Stat 73, this is in June 25th, 1868, it says, whereas the people of, and they list a bunch of southern states, have, in pursuance of the provisions of, which was the Reconstruction Act, they framed a constitution and state government, and then what they're saying is that because these states framed Constitution incorporating Article 14, that they now will be admitted to representation. Now, remember last week we covered that they had no grounds to deny the southern states representation in Congress. They had no right to do it. We showed that it was illegal, and it's in those notes if you read them carefully. And it was a violation of Article 5, Section 5 of the United States, of the Constitution for the United States of America. We believe, we're pretty sure, that after the 14th Amendment, the Constitution for the United States of America became the Constitution of the United States of America. So we believe there's two constitutions in effect, and you cannot get access to the Constitution of your original state. You can't access your pre-14th Amendment state constitution because you're a federal citizen or presumed to be one, and therefore the Constitution of the United States of America is a de facto one, while the Constitution for is the de jure. Now let's go into de facto government. Here's a definition. One that maintains itself by a display of force against the will of the rightful legal government and is successful, at least temporarily, in overturning the institutions of the rightful legal government by setting up its own in lieu thereof. So therefore, folks, with this new government being installed of federal citizens is a de facto government, and it was imposed by martial law powers by force. So it's totally a de facto state pursuant to law and fact. So as a result, new de facto states were formed because new constitutions, new legislatures were formed with new citizens, federal citizens. Here's Coleman versus Miller, 507 U.S. 448. Here's another one, 59 Supreme Court 972, says, the legislatures of Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina had rejected the amendment in November and December. They're talking about the 14th Amendment. New governments were erected in those states and in others under the direction of Congress. The new legislatures ratified the amendment, that of North Carolina, South Carolina. So there you go. A new state was formed within a state. So you have two constitutions. You have the de jure and the de facto. And if you're claiming that you're not a federal citizen or you're not one of these, but you're not being specific in your argument or your position of which constitution you're under, you're toast, because you're going to be presumed to be under their de facto one, under martial law powers. So I'm going to get to the point here. The 14th Amendment created a dual nationality status in which federal citizenship status was conjoined with an inseparable state, quote, resident citizen status. This formed a new body politic which impaired the original body politic of those who possessed the singular state national status by disenfranchising them from voting. So this government can only really represent federal citizens. So now in law arguments, a lot of people they'll say, "Oh, well, we've heard that before," and they'll reject it as a political argument. Right, LB?
Sometimes, yes. For those listening.
Well, Richard McDonald, he got his clock cleaned in federal court. There's cases that Richard McDonald did. With all due respect to Richard McDonald and his research, I've benefited from some of his research, but he was trying to take the position that the 14th Amendment was not properly ratified,
right,
and therefore he couldn't be one of them because the law was void, which is actually a pretty logical position. I think it's admirable that he presented that in court, and he had the, as we say down south with some of our Spanish heritage, we say he had the cojones to do it.
Yeah.
So
well, the way they're operating is by force first, and they trick people into participating in this system, and the bulk of the people, or they've made it optional actually to participate. So no one can really complain about it, is the way I look at it. So anyway, that's another story for another day.
Oh, yeah. So
it's all Amendment. So
what they try to do, they'll say, "Oh no, you're doing that 14th Amendment stuff, guys. No, that's been rejected as a political argument, and the courts can't hear it because it's political." And that's what they did to Richard. They sent him a packing and said, "No, political argument, ratification. That's all deals with them, and it's political." So what we're now doing is we're taking this position that because they violated laws, we're trying to make it more in law, which makes it more in court, and then we demonstrate that these constitutional violations affect my substantive rights. So therefore, we can go into court with this. We don't want to go to court, but if we have to be ready to present an in-law position rather than them hustling us off into the political argument bandwagon. So let's look at these constitutions.
Courts won't hear political arguments or positions.
They can't.
Just so you people know.
So we make it in law.
It steps on the legislative and help me out, the executive branch.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't do it. So
when we show them okay, so let's say the 39th and 40th Congresses, in imposing the Reconstruction Act and Amendment 14, they violated Article 5, Section 5 of the Constitution for the United States of America. Quote, "And that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate." So when they just denied seats in Congress in 1865 that I talked about in the last show, did the states consent to that? Did they say, "Hey, Congress, no, we don't want any senators or people in the House for our state and sitting up there"? Of course not. It'd be ridiculous. So they definitely violated Article 5, Section 5. How about Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution for the United States of America? Quote, "Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them." Okay, let's connect the word "them" with the word United States. It's using the United States as a plural, not a singular entity. I'm going to say this again. Article 3, Section 3, Constitution for the United States of America. Quote, "Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort." So
that's got a different connotation to it. And a lot of people, I haven't really written a paper on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of sketchy in a sense. It's probably setting up 14th Amendment principles in some respects. But,
well, totally.
Each state has its own constitution, and each state has its own treason provisions under the law of nations and sometimes or usually under their own constitution. So the only way that federal provision in the Constitution can kick in is if the United States of America was having a war with, let's say, Russia or France again. Use France. That's the only place that provision kicks in. And as far as I'm concerned, this is my opinion, of course, and it makes total sense. The state, your state, has, if the Union is acting as it should in one unit, the state would have primary jurisdiction to prosecute you for treason. It's, I don't know, one of those clauses in the Constitution where I don't think it needs to be there, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess my position was that they even used in 39th Congress, the first Reconstruction Act of the 39th Congress was Bill 1143. And here's the title of it: "A bill to establish an additional article of war for the more complete suppression of insurrection against the United States." So they levied war against 11 southern states. So pursuant to Article 3, Section 3, I'm saying that that's treason. But I know what you're saying from that provision was probably put in there for more of your foreign, like if Russia was like bombing Florida or something, right?
Right. I just think it's a very confusing clause. I'm very suspicious of it.
Like, people will say, well, why were the Reconstruction Acts, how come, that was legitimate? They were in rebellion, da-da-da. Well, we said they weren't, and we proved it, but we said that it was wrong because they did these military war powers in times of peace, pursuant to the last show. And folks, you need to read Johnson's vetoes to the Reconstruction Acts. You'll learn so much. He vetoed the Reconstruction Acts 3 times, and it's just rich with law. He knew the law. Johnson knew the law, not like these jokers that we have in the presidency now. The whole point, folks, remember what I said, we're showing law violations, so that way they can't lump us into, oh, you're making a political argument. The Reconstruction Acts were inconsistent with criteria. Okay, there was criteria for martial law provisions. In Ex parte Milligan, it says martial law, it gives a whole mess of criteria. Martial law cannot arise from a threatened invasion. The necessity must be actual and present, the invasion real, such as effectually closes the courts and deposes the civil administration. It follows from what has been said on this subject that there are occasions when martial law can be properly applied. If in foreign invasion or civil war the courts are actually closed and it is impossible to administer criminal justice according to law, men on the theater of active military operations where war really prevails, there is a necessity to furnish a substitute for the civil authority thus overthrown to preserve the safety of the army and society. And as no power is left but the military, it is allowed to govern by martial rule until the laws can have their free course. So this is Ex parte Milligan, 71 U.S. 2, 1866 case. So it says that this is I'll distill it for you folks in English, plain English. The Supreme Court says in this case, martial law measures can only be authorized when actual war closes the courts and deposes the civil authority. The Reconstruction Acts, in times of peace with restored civil order, made martial law operate as though there were an actual war, but they did it in the midst of peace. So civil authority was restored in that the courts of the southern states were open after the Civil War for at least a year before the Reconstruction Act. So there are, under the Constitution, 3 kinds of military jurisdiction. One to be, this is the further quote from Ex parte Milligan, there are under the Constitution, quote, 3 kinds of military jurisdiction. One to be exercised both in peace and war, another to be exercised in time of foreign war, and it goes on. So the 39th Congress had no evidence of the states being in rebellion, so the Reconstruction Acts were not in conformity with the standard of law regarding the provision for military jurisdiction. Now, if you read on in the case, it says that martial rule, they said that martial law can exist in times of peace, but it didn't meet the criteria. The Reconstruction Acts didn't meet that criteria because they said martial rule can only exist in times of peace according to the Constitution is that there's codes of laws enacted by Congress for the government of the armies, for the national forces, in which martial law could only apply to the soldier but not the citizen. So the Reconstruction Acts were unconstitutional because it applied military law only to the citizen and not even to the soldier, and that's what Andrew Johnson goes into. So we're talking about law violations, folks. This is not a political argument, and it affects my substantive rights in that my rightful body politic is in a state of mixed war. They have usurped it, and they're trying to force me to recognize their de facto state of 14th Amendment U.S. citizen body politic through carrying around various adhesions that might colorably evidence it, such as driver's licenses, passports, social security numbers, and the list goes on. Another constitutional violation, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3. No bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. Okay, everybody in the southern states was, in a blanket fashion, declared guilty of rebellion and penalized under unlawful military rule, right? So a bill of attainder is when you just do a blanket, you don't accuse anybody, you accuse a whole class of people And that's what they did with the Reconstruction Acts. They said, oh, you're in rebellion because we wrote it, not because there was any evidence. And we've hammered that a bunch. So Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3, what I'm saying, folks, is that the Reconstruction Acts was a bill of attainder, and that's all in Johnson's vetoes to the Reconstruction Acts. That's where I'm getting it. Okay, before I forget, folks, thank you for listening so far. I thank you much. Those that are not on my email list from last week, you can email me at floridarepublic@gmail.com. Those that are on the list already that got notes, please don't email me. You're going to get the notes from tonight's show. Those that are not on the list, please email me. Let me know you want to be on the list, or any other comments, suggestions, questions, anything. Just fire away, and I'll shoot you off some of the last week's notes and this week's notes. Anyway, we're going to constitutional. Oh, it's time, huh?
Yeah, it's time. We're out.
See you next week, guys.
Jeff. Thanks, Jeff. We'll continue next week.
Bye.
Take care, Pete.
I'll be brought this week as part 2. And rest of Ed down and group 3 or 4 other you guys need. And then the part still in process, hopefully by 2 weeks, hopefully by then. It's all done already this week. All 5 put together, and we'll put time for anybody who wants to call in and talk and have questions and so on and so forth. Everybody's enjoying information. That is Jeff. Well, I also have a copy of those notes. And, what I'll do is get them posted on Freedom Radio site when they have in our little forum. And I'll post it there as well so we can access it without before Jeff is email. It's well known who is listening and who is not. Check it out. Well, it's been a long day for me, and it was a long day weekend. I was trying to get this crop in the ground and to my land, if you will. It's been a couple of days outside. I'm very pleased if you can go. The trilogy, the Hurricane. Once you have seen the movie, don't wait. If you see the movie, it's and you like or you follow the information with get the book. It will blow your mind. There is so much more. The book is always anything. How awful now. Hollywood, they're spitting things. It's it's so disappointing. If you read the book, and we did just go to the movie. I wait for it to come out and view it there because I refuse to very much. I know it's destroyed. Get out and just it's missing compared to what the Foster's really had. Fan of books. It's an ever highly recommend you get into. Check out the other versions of the audio books. The whole trilogy is available on YouTube as well. Each section is now like 47:15. It's like it's for each. But next time you got your trucker, it's a great way to take the time. A lot of on their belt. And grab one of them files or something we had with me satellite. Back at my unit, kind of wearing December. And that's what I used to do all day long. On the road is stuff like that. And I love her on the television up here on. You got a little bit of imagination the book will give you all the information you need and formalize your own mind. And a million times there all the way around. You get so much more attached to the characters. You feel their pain, you feel their joy. You know, it's a world of wonder if you've ever had a book read, even if you're a big reader and enjoy reading books. There's which is a beautiful thing. Don't get me wrong, it's great if you can do that. My eyes, of course, I cannot do that. I cannot read for any length of time unless it's on a computer screen where I can, as my eyes start to blur out, I can mess with the different fonts and zoom out and all that kind of stuff for me to be able to hang without even I can be buying glass for more than about 5 or so. It's not on a computer. With like certain prints today, I mean, I used to be able to a mile away. I can read the smallest print from 100 yards away, think nothing of it. Now today, I can barely, just going blind in my old age, they say. And I just can't read anymore. You can't see the words. Everything becomes a blur. But anyway, it's just a totally different experience, really, just to lay back, close your eyes, and have those stories read to you. And it literally blows your mind. The colors and the images that appear. Even, I'll tell you, if you get in any kind of it's an the bridge, all that information is there. You really you get so into it. Not only have an emotional roller coaster, you can even smell the airs. It just triggers so much more. But it's phenomenal. Anyway, I don't want to keep you guys anymore tonight. I'm exhausted myself and get much sleep at all last night. Zay popped in the chat earlier at the beginning of the show today. Only an hour of sleep. He's out there just time of year out there. Scott Landon's trying to get their crops on the ground and do growing. Ahead time and get back where aren't by 6 minutes. Time starts breaking. We're out. We need to. And sometimes all afternoon and to watch out quick, especially as you know the age. Pop asked last day with all the differences. That was Blog Talk Radio in the prior. And we played, but you actually kind of got the music, so that's a little bit probably forward now. Chris chat in the chat, and I could hear it. I had hit the button, and we were a week of here just to beat your getting stuff together and nothing, but you do all replay on it. You're gonna have the music. So doesn't surprise or me and stay on board connection. There's no one guys going on. Going to part here. One to meet you as Ken. Look forward to next week podcast. That part 3 and 4 is just more to something what's really on. This is really the only thing history-wise to understand and grasp what has occurred to all was almost in you're here from the national folks. It's both individuals from LB work the People's Coalition and the author of Red Amendment. Please do not forget to get your copy today. Yeah, it's very possible. Anything is possible nowadays, especially with me. But anyway, oh yeah, of course, Jeff. Like I said, it's on broadcast after 2000, and yeah, so, he's been a long time. He's got processors, I guess, or under at the state national lives here in the country of myself. He's just wow over there in Tampa Bay Area for sure. He's on the Bay Area, but he's after. But hey, I'm not going to give you guys any more. Until next week, everyone be safe, and until next time. Alrighty, great. Another fabulous
Freedom Reigns
week
Radio
here.
Network is not
BTR.
responsible for the views and opinions of the guests or hosts of the show.
Again.
The views and opinions expressed in this show are strictly the views and opinions of
I
guests
don't know.
or
I
hosts
didn't hear
of this
the
program.
song play on my end, so I'm not sure what's going on. Anyhow. I got a recording for you guys tonight. It takes up about an hour and a half. But anyway, I wanted to give you guys an update. Last week, even though we had all this technical difficulties, the archives did some information, and at least the music was able to play. So let's see what happens this week. It'll come fine, and everything will be picked up. If not, then we can go from there and see what happens. Anyway, all right, update on the garden. Man, I've been outside enjoying it, working with the soils, setting up everything. Set it up. Got plants going. They're doing fantastic. Today, it's almost every day. Going to go out there and spend some time with my garden. It's quite enjoyable. A lot of people are out there doing their thing. And hopefully by now you've got videos and heard enough rain. Even some food. Other reason than that. Plant. Oh, excuse me. So that when you spend a day out in the sun, tires you out. Makes you feel good. There's been a lot of hype and a lot of talk. Everybody talking about the Hunger Games when that came out. That's still being talked about a lot, but sadly, like I thought, the movie, quite frankly, not for the reason you may think, though. If you get a chance, and all three, the trilogy of the Hunger Games series is actually available out there. Purchase, get audio, CD, book audio, or go and buy the books. The books are always 10 times better than the movie. And I finally finished the trilogy today. And I'm not going to give no spoilers. If you picked up on the message of what was taking place and what was going on, and you thought it was a pretty good movie, but you still may have missed a lot of the information and a lot of the point of what was happening. After I'd read the book, I had watched the movie. So I'm trying to follow along. Like, man, they're leaving so much out. Well, this isn't explained. That isn't explained. Nothing's, it's just so. So if you guys are ready, look at the chat. Hey, guys. Okay, everybody's sound is breaking up again. Yeah, that's good. It's getting better. That's good. Anyway, that's why I'm just a little hard because the intro song didn't even want to play. I couldn't hear anything at all coming to my headset, so I don't know what happened there. So we're going to get going here anyway. Kick on back and give a listen to this broadcast. It's been edited down, like I said. We're going to have, this is part 1 and 2. They're edited together. They'll run consecutive. And then maybe next week we'll get 3 and 4 up for you. We'll see how the response are. And then the final part is only going to be about 20 minutes long or so. I have to double check once it's done, depending on when editing phase. So it is when that one's done. And then we can take questions, answers, call-in numbers, all that kind of good stuff. But for now, since there's nothing else taking place, let's start this recording. And we'll be back at the end of the broadcast to finish out tonight's show. Enjoy.
Well, good evening, one and all. This is The Ultimate Remedy. My name is LB Bork. Hope everyone's doing well this 21st of January. In the year of our Lord, 2009. In regards to personam jurisdiction with the courts, if you're in that body politic, they're going to have automatic jurisdiction over you in all personam issues, or that's the legal fiction or the presumption that they're going to apply to you. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. Jeff has been with me before on the show. He is one of the state nationals. I guess he's on. Hello, Jeff.
Hey.
Hey, I was just telling the folks that you've been on the show before, and you've been a state national for about 3 years now, I believe.
2005.
That's going on 4 years, yeah. I've been doing this for people for about 10 years now, and I was the first one that I believe. I have not seen any evidence to negate what I believed to be true. Is I'm the first one to go beyond the state citizenship issue and go to the nationality, which basically no one has done in 140 years or more. Actually, it's been there, but no one really looked at the issues that surround it. And for the past 200 and some years, of course, there's been a lot of disinformation, as far as I'm concerned, throughout the Federalist Papers and other writings to confuse people is why no one understands that the state governments are actually national governments. They don't apply international law to how the union of these American states are put together. And I'm the first one, I think, in over 200 years to really go deep into this study. Of course, there's been a lot of historical documentation, as Joseph Rory has brought forth. It has been altered or covered up. So, we're talking 150 years about since the Civil War took place. So they've destroyed a lot of information. So it's a lot harder to find anything that
are subjugated. And this is evidenced in, I'm referring to a House journal. Now, you can go on the Library of Congress website, and you can research everything I'm saying. It's right there. That you can research the House journals, and I'm also be making references to the statutes at large, and there's certain years that those are available, and you can research the statutes at large at the Library of Congress website. Okay, so what I said in 1861, we have a statement by Vice President Andrew Johnson and a Congressman Crittenden that stated, for the record, in the House Journal and in the Senate Journal, is recorded that the intention of the Civil War was not to conquer or subjugate the southern states. You're going to see why this is why I'm starting to this point. It's very important. I'm going to quote this House Journal, July 22nd, 1861, page 123. Senate Journal, July 25th, 1861, page 92. Mr. Crittenden submitted the following resolution, that this war is not waged on their part, that's the northern states, This war is not waged on their part in any spirit of oppression, or for any purpose of conquest or subjugation, or purpose of overthrowing or interfering with the rights of established institutions of those states. He's referring to the southern states. Now here's what he's saying the intention is, but to defend and maintain the supremacy of the Constitution and to preserve the Union with all dignity, etc., etc. Anyway, he's saying to preserve the Union with all dignity, equality, and rights of the several states unimpaired, and that as soon as these objects are accomplished, the war ought to cease. So there's your intention right now. That's the Crittenden-Johnson resolution. Okay, moving on to 1865. We're going to fast forward. The war is over with. January 31st of 1865, the war was still going on, and the 13th Amendment was proposed to all of the states that existed at the time. May 10th of 1865, President Johnson proclaims the end of the hostilities on land. So, now January 31st, 13th volume, Statutes at Large, page 757, and when President Johnson proclaimed an end to the hostilities on land, and the only duty left was to arrest the vessels at sea of the southern states, and that was on May 10th, and that's in Senate Journal starting at page 7 of May 10th. So, I'm going somewhere with this. Now, the states which ratified the 13th Amendment, southern states, okay, I'm just going to say the southern states, Virginia, Louisiana, Tennessee, Arkansas, South Carolina, Alabama, North Carolina, that was in February of 1865. That's a month. I mean, whoa, that's like a week, almost a little over a week after the 13th Amendment was proposed to the states. They ratified it. These southern states did. Now, on December 4th of 1865, so this is almost at the end of the year now, that's a new Congress sitting. So the reps in Congress that ratified the 13th Amendment was in 1865. That's the 38th Congress. But now a new Congress comes in, the 39th Congress. The first session, December 4th, 1865, they suggested denial of the seats in the House and Senate of the southern states on the basis that they had no legal governments and were in rebellion. So this is where we're starting to get the plot here. Okay, if the 39th Congress is claiming that these states were illegal governments,
it would relate to the research I've done. I learned a lot from Bovier's Law Dictionary, 1856 version, is where I started having my eyes opened, and of course studying the things that surround the Civil War period, and to what they've put out in political propaganda to confuse people. So anyway, having said that, I mentioned in the email to the folks that are on the PAC e-letter that we're going to talk about Section 2 of the 14th Amendment tonight. That's going to be the end result of where we're going for the next two shows. Tonight we're going to talk about status, and Jeff has been diligent to put some information together. Like I said, he's been a national for 3 years now or more, and he's done a lot of study, and he's probably the best second best knowledgeable person that I know on the issue or subject in the United States that I've run across.
I'm flattered.
Yeah, well, take it lightly. No, I'm just kidding. There's not a lot of people that are glomming onto this information. It's very surprising. Go ahead, Jeff. I've been talking long enough.
We are attempting to establish within tonight and in a subsequent show next week, possibly even to a third show, we are establishing why it's a crime pursuant to constitutional law and international law, why it's a crime to be what we call a United States citizen, what the law says a United States citizen is. We're going to prove to you in law, without any conjecture, that being a U.S. citizen is a crime, that you're in fact engaged in criminal activity against your lawful state body politic, which has been usurped through this unlawful citizenship imposed via the 14th Amendment. So tonight we're showing that the constitutionally repugnant Reconstruction Acts, these acts of the 39th Congress were constitutionally repugnant, and these acts imposed the 14th Amendment. Did not ratify it, it imposed it unlawfully, pursuant to martial law powers that were also constitutionally unauthorized. There are constitutionally authorized martial law powers, however, but the Reconstruction Acts met none of that criteria. So I'm going to lay out a timeline. This might seem rather dry, might even seem like a history lesson, but hopefully you'll be blessed by this information and get a pen and pad out, or if you want, I will email you my notes. And that's a good idea. That way we'll know if you're actually paying attention or not and actually listening to the show, or actually interested in this material by emailing me for these notes. It's all it is a timeline. It's nothing fancy, but you can do your own research. You can email me, Jeff. Here's my email, floridarepublic@gmail.com. That's floridarepublic@gmail.com. Email me for the notes. Anyway, we're going to start in 1861, and the object of the Civil War, which was from 1861 to 1865, that the actual intention of it was not for the southern states to become
too many dots missing, if you will, to get from point A to point B. And if you want to connect those dots and you really want to find out the story of Katniss and what took place on that first Hunger Game for her and what took place when she returned home, then you really do need to get the trilogy. I could have made this a small mini-series. Could have been done in 6 hours compared to trying to condense it for a 2-hour movie. But that's Hollywood for you. Now some people think, well, that's just the propaganda of the government and where we're heading today. They're just, rubbing our noses in it. Well, need to read the trilogy to discover a lot more than your assumptions. But anyway, that's the update. Garden's doing well. Got some more seeds I want to get into the ground probably tomorrow. I want to add some more to my current crops that are growing. The ground's all prepped and ready to go. Just gotta add my seeds and get those in tomorrow. A little late to be doing from seed for a lot of things, but that's okay. Because if you plant things at different times, depending on what you're planting, not everything comes ripe at the same time, and this way you have food spaced out, on the whole year, right on to the winter time. So that's kind of my goal there. I have my tomatoes are looking great. Peppers are really starting to come in now. Of course, my corn is growing like a weed, and so is my squash and my beans. They're doing excellent. But I want to get some more cucumbers in. They go well, I believe, with different melons. That batch there, cucumber melon. And we're together from something new for me. These were stuff, man. Cucumbers is a problem. Pickles. That's to make you got to add cucumbers. That's a little bit. Lots of those. Anyway, you guys are settled in. I'm going to play this for part. Probably be a series. It was edited out and edited down real, just to get you the important information here. This is L.B. Bork, founder of the People's Awareness Coalition and the author of the Red Amendment. If you haven't gotten your copy yet, please do so. And this is from one of the older talk shows with Jeff, who's a state national here in Florida, in my country. And he brings it together and puts it all together in a nice package along with all his reference material and his notes. And you can get a copy of that. You'll hear how to do that throughout the program. But it's about an hour and a half. So we're going to get that thing going there. It's actually 20 minutes or so.